In one night, my whole world shattered into pieces. I thought I knew the man I had lived with for 10 years, but in reality, it was a perfect lie. This is not a story about revenge, although it all started with it. This is a story about how deep betrayal can go and how little it takes to find the strength to start from scratch. Are you ready to find out what happens when a man loses everything in order to finally find himself? Aaron woke up at the usual 6 a.m. The silence in the apartment felt thick, like morning fog. He froze for a while, listening to the sounds outside. Somewhere outside the window, an engine was purring softly, and a fine rain was barely audible on the roof. Chloe was still asleep, curled up under a heavy blanket. Her breathing was steady, but Aaron sensed that something had shifted in their family life. She's changed lately. She's been staying late at the office, often referring to urgent assignments. Her mobile phone, which was usually on the countertop, was now constantly with her, and if the calls came at an unusual time, she retreated to another room, quietly closing the door behind her. They used to discuss everything, even the little things like the neighbor's bulldog gnawing on the baseboards or the morning traffic report on the highway. Now, there was a cold detachment in her answers. That morning, Aaron, as if trying to convince himself, decided to ignore his suspicions. After making strong coffee, he habitually took out bagels and cream cheese from the cupboard. Chloe never had breakfast, but he left her a bagel in case she changed her mind. As he left for work, he took another look at her. She lay motionless, and her face seemed unfamiliar, as if it were not the same spouse with whom he had lived for 10 years. At the auto parts factory, he spent 8 hours at the milling machine, catching the rhythm of rotation and precisely laying the lines of the cutting tool. The monotonous work was soothing, but it was impossible to get rid of disturbing thoughts. His colleague and friend Sam noticed this, and holding out a glass of soda, chuckled, "What's so gloomy, Air?" "Did my wife restrict access to my bill account?" Aaron chuckled. "I'm just tired." In the evening, returning home, he decided to go to the Fresh Market grocery supermarket. At the checkout, when he was already making purchases, his gaze accidentally fell on a small object on a stand. It was a glossy business card. The logo of an elite bistro that he didn't recognize made Aaron frown. He recently saw the exact same one on Chloe's nightstand when she thought he wasn't looking. She quickly hid it, but the fact itself stuck somewhere in the back of his mind. At home, he was greeted by the same Chloe. She was sitting on the couch, engrossed in texting on her phone, a slight smile playing on her lips. But Aaron wasn't happy about it. He put the shopping bags on the kitchen island and, passing by, said, "How was your day? Did you finish late today?" Her gaze rested on him for a moment, and something flashed in her eyes that he couldn't decipher. Although everything inside was screaming, he felt like he was standing on the edge of an abyss, but he didn't know how to get out of it. At dinner, they ate in silence, each immersed in their own worries. Chloe seemed distant, as if they were not spouses, but random neighbors. Later that evening, Aaron decided to test one of his most unpleasant guesses. With his heart pounding like a jackhammer, he knew it was wrong, but curiosity and anxiety overwhelmed him. There was nothing suspicious in her tote bag, lip gloss, smartphone, keys, but in the side compartment he found something unexpected, a gold business card of the same institution. He sat down at the dining table, holding it in his hands, and stared at the name Red Velvet. When Chloe returned, he had already put the card back. She was wearing a housecoat with her hair down, but her smile seemed strained. She kissed him on the cheek, wished him a good night, and headed for the bedroom. Aaron remained sitting, staring into a mug of cold cocoa. Something had irrevocably broken in their relationship, and that sound, though inaudible to others, echoed only in his soul. His life suddenly began to resemble a play where actors play roles but forget the script. Chloe had become more and more like a stranger over the past few weeks, and now Aaron was suspicious of her every gesture. Yesterday's find, a gold business card with the name Red Velvet, was spinning in his head like a splinter that could not be pulled out. He worked mechanically, feeling like he was on autopilot. Sam, noticing his sullen look, tried to talk to him again. "What's the matter with you, Air? Are you completely gloomy? Maybe we can go have a beer after our shift? You'll unwind." Aaron just waved it away. He had never been a fan of evening gatherings, preferring the peace of home, but now he no longer warmed the comfort of his home. The house felt empty, as if the warmth had disappeared along with the trust. On the way home, he again noticed little things that he would not have noticed before. Chloe stopped sending him messages during the day. Her smartphone was now protected by a PIN code, although they used to freely take each other's gadgets to look at pictures or check the time. In the evening, Aaron decided that he could no longer ignore his suspicions. He began to act. Chloe announced again that she had a lot of work to do and she would be late, perhaps even until midnight. He already had a clear plan of action. As soon as the front door closed behind her, he didn't turn on the TV as usual, but got dressed and followed her out. Her footsteps on the fire escape were light. She didn't even look back. Aaron kept his distance, trying not to give himself away. On the street, she quickly went to the bus stop, but to his amazement, she did not get into it, but into a service taxi. Aaron guessed that she was probably heading to the same place. He hailed another taxi and asked the driver to follow the first car, trying to stay at a sufficient distance. Everything was bubbling inside him. Adrenaline, anger, pain, but at the same time he felt a strange relief, as if everything was about to become obvious. The taxi stopped at a brightly lit building with neon letters Midnight Salon. Chloe got out, straightened her hair, and headed inside. Aaron stayed in the car, watching what was happening. He waited about 12 minutes, wondering if he should follow her, but then decided that if he wanted to know the truth, he couldn't stop. Upon entering the bar, he immediately felt uncomfortable. Loud music, dim lights, and crowds of people talking, laughing, and sipping cocktails. Someone was playing a trumpet in the corner. Aaron looked around and almost immediately saw Chloe. She was sitting at a table in the company of a man, tall, confident, with an expensive watch on his wrist. They were laughing. Chloe leaned closer to whisper something and touched his arm. Aaron felt his heart tighten, but he forced himself to move. Standing behind a pillar, he watched them until he saw a man put his arm around Chloe's shoulders and kiss her on the head. Realization flashed through him. It was not a friendly meeting. It was betrayal in the most obvious form. He quickly left the bar without waiting for her to continue. Outside, the cool night air hit him in the face, but it didn't help him recover. He just stood there and stared into the void. The words of justification he had tried to find for Chloe before now seemed insignificant. At home, he sat on the couch staring at the blank TV screen. Everything he knew about his life suddenly turned out to be a lie. He remembered their wedding celebration, their honeymoon, the years they spent together, and it all shattered against reality like brittle glass. Later that night, when Chloe returned, he didn't ask her a single question. He looked at her as an outsider. She mumbled cheerfully that she was tired and that it had been a busy day. Aaron just nodded, suppressing the bitterness inside. He knew that everything would change now. He didn't sleep that night. Before his eyes was the image of Chloe and her lover, their laughter, their touch. His head was full of questions. Why? How could she? But somewhere deep inside, behind these questions, a thought began to arise, quiet and cold like a winter breeze. He realized that the world would never be the same again. Aaron woke up early, as soon as the alarm went off with a ringtone. A lingering feeling of despair was like an unbearably heavy weight pressing down on his chest. Chloe, as if nothing had happened, was still asleep, snoring softly in the bedroom. Her calmness irritated Aaron now. How could she sleep so peacefully after what she had done? With that thought in mind, he headed for the kitchen. A cup of strong coffee cleared my mind a little. Aaron felt like he had to do something. A conversation with Chloe? No, he wasn't ready for that. Her excuses, lies, maybe even tears, all this would only cause even more disgust. But it was also unbearable to remain silent. Part of him desperately wanted justice, but the other part wanted something more substantial. He sat down at the table, putting a notebook in front of him. The first thing that appeared on his blank page was, "What do I want?" Aaron stared at these words for a long time, as if trying to penetrate deep into himself, and suddenly everything became clear. He didn't just want to know the truth. He wanted Chloe and her date to realize how deeply they had betrayed him, to feel the pain he had endured. The idea of retribution began to form in his mind. Aaron understood that he needed a plan, thoughtful and precise, like a blueprint. His job as a CNC machine operator has always required accuracy and attention to detail, and now he has decided to apply these skills in his personal life. Chloe went to work, leaving the house in its usual silence. Aaron saw her off without further ado, nodding coldly when she said, "I'll probably be late today. I have to submit my report." She didn't even try to lie convincingly. It only added fuel to the fire of his anger. As soon as the door closed behind her, Aaron opened his laptop. He needed more information about her lover. It was easy to start. The same bistro where he saw them together turned out to be a popular place in the city center. Aaron found his social media page and then photos from corporate events. Among them were several pictures from the company's parties, one of which he recognized as the man sitting at the table with Chloe. Tall, trim, with a smug grin, he stood next to the executive director of a large financial organization, the Global Trust Group. He quickly found the right name: Andrew Spencer, Chief Financial Officer. Aaron saved the picture, noting to himself that this man looked as if he was confident in his integrity. He spent the next few hours researching Spencer on the internet. There were many interviews and articles about his success in the world of finance. Andrew actively blogged, posting photos of expensive sports cars and trips abroad. All of this only made Aaron more indignant. But one detail particularly caught his attention. In one of the photos taken 6 months ago, Andrew was standing by a vehicle that, as reported in news reports, was on the wanted list. Aaron took a screenshot. It could be useful. The plan began to take shape. Aaron understood that retribution must be total and destructive. Chloe and Andrew must experience for themselves what it's like to lose everything. The first point was the financial blow. Aaron remembered that Chloe always refueled her car at the same gas station on her way home. He installed a mobile application that allows him to track the movements of her debit card. Now he could know exactly where she was at any time. The second step involved preparing an audio recording. He hid the miniature recorder in her bag so that if she was dating Andrew, he would hear it. The third point concerned Spencer himself. Aaron called an acquaintance from a security company with whom he had previously worked on temporary jobs. "Listen, Pitt, I need a favor," he began, trying to keep his voice calm. "We need personal information for one guy." Pitt, accustomed to such requests, did not ask unnecessary questions. Soon, Aaron was handed a dossier on Andrew, minor administrative violations, overdue loan payments for one of his cars, and, most importantly, his home address. Soon, Aaron was able to gather everything he needed. Chloe, as it turned out, actually dated Andrew almost weekly. The calls recorded on the recorder confirmed this. She talked to him about future plans together and discussed trips that Aaron didn't know anything about. But the biggest blow to his soul was caused by her words. "I'm tired of lying. Soon I'll tell him that I'm leaving." Aaron felt his heart constrict at those words, but along with the pain came rage. He wouldn't let her leave just like that. She must feel the full weight of the consequences of her actions. In recent days, Aaron has become especially attentive to details. He already knew what he wanted to do. Andrew, with his ostentatious success, would have to lose everything: his reputation, assets, connections. But Chloe had a different fate. In the evening, Aaron sat in the kitchen, looking out the window. Snowflakes were slowly swirling outside the window, settling on the ground. There was a notebook on the table, filled with neat lines. The plan was completed. All that remains is to wait for the right moment to put it into effect. When Chloe returned home, she smiled as usual and asked, "How was your day?" Aaron looked up, feigning calmness, and replied, "It's fine. What about you?" "Tired," she replied shortly and headed for the bedroom. He watched her go and then turned his eyes to the notebook. There was a clear realization in his head. Tomorrow, something would begin that would change everything. Winter came suddenly, as if someone had flipped a switch, enveloping the city in snow and coolness. Aaron was walking along the snowy street after a long day at the factory, where the monotonous clatter of machines only intensified his thoughts about Chloe and her betrayal. He felt exhausted. The plan of retribution was almost completed, but the internal tension wouldn't let go. One part of his soul was still trying to cling to the memories of the old Chloe, the one he had lived with for 10 years. The other, colder and more determined, reminded me that there was no place for weaknesses. Lost in thought, Aaron turned up the collar of his winter jacket and quickened his pace. He needed to go to the grocery store for groceries, but once inside, he suddenly felt tired from the routine. Everything seemed pointless. Why buy groceries for a family that no longer exists? Careful, a voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Aaron whirled around and saw the woman drop a bag of vegetables. Oranges and potatoes rolled on the floor in different directions. She looked confused and apologized to the cashier, who sighed with displeasure. Watching this chaos, Aaron did not hesitate to say, "Let me help," and bent down to pick the vegetables. "Thank you," she replied, looking at him gratefully. Her eyes seemed surprisingly warm to him, despite the fact that her face was tired. They quickly gathered up their purchases, and the woman stood up, wiping her hands on her coat. "Sorry to bother you," she added, awkwardly adjusting the bag on her shoulder. "It's okay," Aaron replied. "Are you in a hurry?" "No, it was just a difficult day as usual," she replied, a little confused. Aaron realized that there was some kind of broken and hidden pain in her voice. She didn't expect the conversation to continue, but Aaron, without expecting it, continued, "I'm Aaron." "Irene?" She introduced herself with a faint smile. "Can I help you carry the bags?" She was a little surprised by his suggestion, but then she nodded. Her hands were frozen, and as Aaron realized, the heavy bag only made the situation worse. Outside, covered in fresh snow, Aaron found out that Irene had recently moved to their neighborhood. Her life was also far from ideal. Her ex-husband turned out to be a despot who humiliated her for years. One day I packed up my things and left, leaving behind everything that connected me with the past. It was hard to start from scratch, she said, stopping in front of her house. But I don't regret it. Sometimes you have to give up everything to save yourself. Her words struck a chord with Aaron. He wondered if it was time for him to leave something behind. He hadn't talked to Chloe in a long time, hadn't tried to figure out her motives. But as he believed, it wasn't about forgiveness. Retribution was now the only way for him to restore justice. "Thank you for your help, Aaron," Irene interrupted his thoughts. She looked at him, and her gaze was somehow understanding. "You're welcome," he nodded. "If you need help, I live in the house across the street." "Okay," she replied shortly and disappeared through the door. On the way home, Aaron thought about the chance encounter for a long time. Something about Irene touched him, her sincerity, the inner strength that was enough for her to leave the tyrant and start a new life. She seemed to understand the pain he was going through right now. In the evening, he opened his notebook again, flipping through the pages with plans for revenge. But now, thoughts of retribution were mixed with something else. He suddenly wanted to sketch something new, something that wasn't about destruction. His thoughts were interrupted by a call. Chloe. She said she would stay with a colleague longer than usual and didn't even bother to come up with a convincing excuse. Aaron dropped the call, not wanting to listen to her. That night, he couldn't sleep again. He thought about Irene, about her warmth, about how, despite her pain, she still found the strength to smile. Their chance meeting seemed to open the door to another reality for him, in which there was no betrayal and lies. 3 days later, he met Irene again, this time by chance, near the deli where they had crossed paths yesterday. She smiled at him, and he felt his heart tremble slightly. They chatted a little longer than last time. Irene turned out to be surprisingly easy to talk to, despite her worries. Aaron found himself thinking that it had been a long time since he had felt such calmness around someone. She offered him a cup of coffee at a small local coffee shop nearby, and Aaron, to his surprise, agreed. Over a cup of hot latte, he learned about her dreams, how she would like to open her own small studio for sewing and repairing clothes. Her story was simple, but somehow inspiring. Aaron could feel something warm beginning to form between them, something he had missed so much in the last years of their marriage. He didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, he felt alive. When he got home, he opened his notebook again. The plan of retribution was still in front of him, but now he looked at it differently. Something in his soul began to change. Irene showed him that even after pain, it is possible to find the strength for a new life. But he knew that he would not be able to let go of the grudge so easily. His internal conflict was just beginning. The city was awash in the lights of the festive bustle on New Year's Eve. Passers-by scurried through the streets with brightly colored shopping bags, the aromas of hot cider and fresh pastries wafted everywhere. Aaron, as if detached from this festive atmosphere, watched the bustle from the bus window. He was on his way to the factory, but his thoughts were not there again. Chloe and her lover remained in the center of his attention, but now images of Irene mingled with these thoughts more and more often. Her warm smile, calm voice, sincere gaze. Aaron suddenly realized that her presence had become for him a kind of island of stability in the world that was collapsing around him. However, there was no time for reflection today. This day was a key one. On New Year's Eve, he was going to launch the first part of his revenge plan. Andrew Spencer had to face the consequences of his arrogance and betrayal. Aaron spent the morning at the factory checking the operating circuits. My hands were working, but my mind was busy with other things. He mentally went over the details of the plan, confident that everything should work out perfectly. He had known for a long time that Andrew spent a lot of time in an elite nightclub where only a select few were allowed. This club was a place for business meetings, questionable agreements, and, as he suspected, for entertainment beyond the bounds of what was allowed. A few days ago, Aaron left an anonymous letter with the club administration containing compromising information on Andrew. The letter mentioned fraud with the corporation's funds, as well as information about links with criminal elements. Aaron didn't know if they would believe it right away, but he prudently attached copies of the documents he had received through his friend. The letter also contained information that Andrew was allegedly going to use the club to launder funds. It all sounded convincing, and Aaron was sure that on New Year's Eve, the club administration would not ignore Andrew. By evening, Aaron returned home. Chloe was about to leave for her friends. She looked elegant in a new evening outfit that Aaron guessed she had bought especially for Andrew. "How are you going to celebrate the new year?" she asked, straightening her hair in front of the mirror. Aaron shrugged his shoulders. "Calm down at home." She nodded, not even trying to offer him company. It has already become commonplace. She disappeared, leaving behind a suffocating scent of expensive perfumes and emptiness. But it was this emptiness that gave him clarity. He knew that Chloe had gone to the club to spend the evening with Andrew. He knew she was going to be disappointed. When the clock struck midnight, Aaron was standing at the window watching the fireworks. There were shouts of joy in the city, and someone was setting off firecrackers in the street. He thought about how his life had changed over the past year. At that moment, his phone vibrated. It was a message from Pitt, an acquaintance of his who helped with information about Spencer. "You won't believe it, but he's screwed. The club administration called the police. It seems that someone found something interesting in his papers there. He probably won't come out today." Aaron grinned as he placed the glass on the windowsill. It was a victory, the first but significant one. Spencer, with his smug smile and expensive watch, finally faced reality. And Chloe is probably sitting somewhere nearby right now, confused and scared. In the morning, Aaron decided to leave the house to unwind. He found himself back in the small coffee shop where he had recently met with Irene. To his surprise, she was there too, sitting at a table, reading a print edition. "Happy New Year," she greeted, gesturing for him to sit down. They talked for a long time, sharing plans for the future. Aaron suddenly realized that he felt like a different person next to Irene, calm, confident, even a little happy. Irene told how, for the first time in a long time, she celebrated the new year alone, without tension and the need to pretend. Aaron listened attentively, feeling that their casual acquaintance was becoming something significant for him. When he returned home, Chloe had not returned yet. This did not surprise him. He knew that after yesterday it would be difficult for her to explain why the evening had not gone according to her script. Aaron went into the kitchen, opened his notebook, and, flipping through the pages, noticed how much time and effort he had invested in his revenge. But now there was a small but important change in his heart. Perhaps it was all worth it to leave the past behind and start living for himself. He wondered if Irene wasn't just a chance encounter. What if she could really be the one to save him? Aaron didn't know what awaited him next, But at that moment, for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a choice, and that choice was no longer dictated by revenge. Aaron woke up early, although he had slept restlessly during the night. The events of yesterday were still spinning in my head. His vengeful plan had worked perfectly, and Andrew Spencer was probably trying to sort out the problems his own arrogance had gotten him into. But this success did not bring Aaron the expected relief. Instead, emptiness still swirled inside, mixed with a slight sense of guilt. He made strong coffee and sat down at the table to relax for a moment. For the first time in a long time, he felt that even thinking about where Chloe was and who she was with no longer caused him much pain. It was all part of the past now. However, the past reminded me of itself. A few hours later, Chloe returned. Aaron heard the keys scratching on the lock, the front door opening noisily. He came out of the kitchen and saw her, an expression of annoyance and anxiety on her face. "Hi," she said, taking off her boots. "How did you celebrate the new year?" Aaron asked calmly, leaning on the doorframe. She looked up at him sharply, her expression wary. "I'm fine," she replied shortly and walked past him into the bedroom. Aaron felt his irritation rising. Her behavior no longer seemed like indifference. Rather, it was something else, insecurity. He realized that her game was starting to crumble. "Do you want to tell me where you've been?" he continued without raising his voice. Chloe paused in the bedroom doorway, then slowly turned around. "I told you, at a friend's place. We just sat and talked." Aaron chuckled, but didn't answer. Her excuses were so weak that it seemed even she didn't believe in them. He decided not to insist, but inside he already knew that the moment when the truth would become obvious was near. All day, staying at home, Chloe seemed unnaturally quiet. She hardly spoke, avoided Aaron's gaze, and spent most of her time on the phone. Aaron watched her, not seeming to notice her tension. Everything escalated in the evening. Chloe was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her messages, when her phone suddenly rang. "You're not taking it?" he asked, barely hiding the sarcasm in his voice. "It doesn't matter," Chloe replied quickly, turning off the call. But for Aaron, it was a signal for action. He came closer, putting his hands on the back of the chair. "Chloe, I don't want to play these games anymore. You know yourself that everything has gone beyond the limits for a long time. Maybe it's time to talk honestly?" She tensed, clearly preparing to defend herself, but Aaron continued, "I know it's been going on for months." Her face paled. For a second, it looked like she was going to try to object, but then her shoulders slumped. "How do you know that?" "What is it?" she asked softly, looking away. "It doesn't matter. The important thing is that I know," Aaron replied, feeling strangely calm. Chloe got up from the table and began to pace the room nervously. "I'm sorry, Aaron. I'm really sorry. I'm just confused. Everything is too complicated." "Confused?" Aaron raised an eyebrow. "Do you think betrayal and lies can be complicated?" "You don't understand anything." "Stop it," she suddenly shouted. "I'm tired of our life, of this routine, of the factory, of you always being so right." Those words hit harder than Aaron expected. She wasn't talking about him, but about her dissatisfaction, but it still hurt. "And you decided that the answer was Spencer?" He couldn't hide his sarcasm. That arrogant guy who was already under investigation on New Year's Day? Chloe froze. She obviously didn't know that Andrew was in serious trouble. Her face reflected confusion and fear. "What do you mean?" "It's nothing. Maybe your lover will tell you when you call him," Aaron replied coldly. Her hands trembled. She tried to say something, but her voice got stuck in her throat. Aaron felt that his control over the situation had reached its peak. That night, Chloe went into the bedroom alone. Aaron stayed in the kitchen, thinking about everything that had happened. Talking to her was painful, but at the same time relieving. There were no more secrets. However, he did not feel victorious. Revenge had already been committed, but its consequences were just beginning. He needed to stop living in the past and look for a future in which there would be no place for Chloe and her lies. He remembered Irene, her sincerity, her warm smile. Aaron suddenly realized that this woman had become more than just an acquaintance for him. She was a symbol that life could be different. Now that everything was clear, Aaron realized that there was still a lot to solve, but for the first time in a long time, he felt the strength to leave everything behind. It's been a week since Aaron and Chloe finally had an open conversation. If you could even call it a conversation, more like an exchange of accusations and disappointment. Chloe was pulling away more and more, as if she felt that she was on the edge of a precipice, but still did not understand how to overcome it. Aaron, on the other hand, felt constant relief. The lie had been brought to light, and with it his former feelings for his wife. But Chloe has changed. The ease with which she used to lie and hide her infidelity has disappeared. There was fear in her eyes now. She stayed out less often in the evenings and spent more and more time at home, but not because she wanted to. If her phone rang, she looked at it, but immediately put it back down. One evening, when Aaron returned home from the factory, he found her sitting on the couch with a glass of red wine. It was unusual. Chloe rarely drank at home alone. Her face was thoughtful and her eyes were red, as if she had been crying recently. "Are you okay?" he asked, taking off his jacket. Chloe jumped, not expecting to hear his voice. She tried to smile, but it didn't look convincing. "Yeah, I'm just thinking." Aaron sat down at the table, watching her. She looked exhausted, and despite everything that had happened between them, he still had a feeling of compassion. "Are you thinking about Spencer?" he asked bluntly. She lowered her gaze. "Yes." There was a pause. Aaron noticed her fingers tapping nervously on the glass. He stopped responding to me since he started having problems. I tried to call, but he just ignores me." Aaron felt an involuntary smile appear on his lips. Everything was predictable. A man like Spencer won't hold on to someone who no longer benefits him. "What are you going to do?" "What is it?" he asked, trying not to sound too harsh. Chloe looked up at him, and there was a strange mixture of guilt and despair in her eyes. "I do not know. I feel like I've lost everything." These words sounded to Aaron like an admission of her defeat, but he didn't want to give in to pity. After all, she chose this path on her own. In the following days, Chloe continued to withdraw into herself. Aaron could see her trying to get back into her usual rhythm, but her previous confidence was gone. She tried to start conversations, asking about his work, how his day had been, but Aaron answered in monosyllables. It was hard for him to open up to her again after everything that had happened. One night, he heard Chloe crying. Her muffled sobs came from the bedroom as he lay on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Aaron listened for a long time without moving, and then suddenly he caught himself thinking, it doesn't hurt anymore. Those tears no longer made him want to comfort her. They were just an echo of something that had died. One evening, returning home, Aaron noticed a familiar figure at the entrance to the entrance. It was Irene. She stood there, waiting for him, with a slight smile on her lips. "Hi," she said as he came closer. "Hi," Aaron replied, pleasantly surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I was passing by and thought that we hadn't talked for a long time. Why don't we have some coffee?" she suggested. Together, they went to the same small coffee shop where they had already met more than once. The atmosphere was cozy and quiet, and talking to Irene reminded Aaron that the world wasn't limited to his problems with Chloe. Irene told me that she was going to open a clothing repair studio. She finally saved up enough money to rent a small space. Aaron listened to her with interest, catching himself thinking that her energy and determination inspired him. "And you?" she asked, looking at him warmly. "How are you, Aaron?" Aaron took a sip of coffee and thought, "It's probably the first time in a long time that I feel like I'm starting to move forward." Irene nodded, her eyes knowing. "That's good. You deserve it." When he returned home, Chloe was sitting on the couch again, but this time she was ready to talk. "I want to apologize," she said softly. Aaron was surprised. These were the first words of apology for the entire time of their conflict. "For what?" he asked, not hiding his skepticism. "For everything," she replied. Her voice was trembling. "For lying to you, for ruining what we had. I do not know why I did this." Aaron stared at her in silence, sorting out his feelings. There was a certain amount of selfishness in her confession. Her apology seemed more like an attempt to mitigate her own guilt than a real desire to correct mistakes. "Chloe, have you finally apologized to yourself?" he asked. She looked at him in disbelief. "What do you mean?" "You're trying to get rid of your pain, but until you forgive yourself, you won't care if I forgive you." The words stung her. She buried her face in her hands, and her soft sobs could be heard again. Aaron left her alone. He felt that he had done his best. Now she had to sort herself out. That night, Aaron couldn't sleep for a long time again. He thought about Chloe, about her tears, about how before he would have done anything not to see her in such a state. But now it was different. His thoughts kept returning to Irene, to her calmness, which had become a ray of light in his gloomy world, an opportunity to start over with a clean slate. And although the past still held him in its shackles, he began to feel that he could free himself. For the first time in a long time, he thought about the future not with pain, but with hope. Winter was slowly receding. The snow, which had recently been a soft carpet, now turned into ice piles covered with a gray crust. But there was no place for a bleak landscape in Aaron's soul. The last few weeks had been like a chess game, where every move led to victory not only over betrayal, but also over one's own pain. He felt more confident at the factory. The work shifts flew by faster, and colleagues increasingly noticed that he was himself again, calm, focused, but not sullen like before. Sam even clapped him on the shoulder once. "Hey, I see life is getting better, you just can't find out." Aaron just smiled back. He didn't want to share his thoughts. Everything that was happening belonged only to him, and he felt that this stage should end on his terms. Meanwhile, Andrew Spencer's problems were snowballing. Aaron continued to follow the news, carefully reading articles about financial fraud at the company where his former rival worked. A scandal broke out. The owners of the company discovered that Spencer had spent large sums on questionable transactions that turned out to be unprofitable. The police were investigating, and although charges had not yet been officially filed, Andrew had clearly lost control of the situation. Moreover, his reputation was tarnished. There were rumors in the press about his connections with criminal structures. Aaron suspected that some of these rumors were the result of his own anonymous campaign. He knew he was overreacting, but it didn't matter anymore. Andrew had destroyed his family, and now he was the victim of destruction himself. One evening, Aaron saw Chloe sitting in the kitchen again. She looked tired and depressed. Her eyes were red, as if from crying for a long time, but she tried to hold herself with dignity. "Have you heard of Spencer?" she asked casually. Aaron pretended that he did not understand what was being said. "About what exactly?" Chloe sighed, and her voice became quieter. "He's not in touch anymore. He's been fired, and he seems to be in serious trouble." Aaron felt a slight, almost vindictive joy. This was the moment he had been waiting for. "What are you going to do?" "What is it?" he asked with cold calmness. Chloe looked away. "Me. I don't know. Everything went wrong. I thought that." She paused, as if hesitating to continue. "That he's going to be your salvation?" Aaron finished for her. His voice was firm, but not malicious. "You know, Chloe, people like him don't save. They only destroy." Chloe didn't say anything. Her face expressed pain and despair. The next day, Aaron met with Irene again. She invited him to see the room she rented for her studio. Aaron could feel her enthusiasm infecting him. He helped her hang shelves and install lighting fixtures, and in return, she treated him to homemade cookies and tea. You know, Irene said as they sat on the floor among the boxes, you've changed a lot since we met. For the better? Aaron asked with a faint smile. Yes, now you look like you've found your place. Aaron thought about her words. Maybe she was right. He used to live for something that had long since lost its meaning. Now, he felt that his life was being filled with content again, albeit in a different way. The ending with Spencer came unexpectedly. Aaron learned from news reports that he had been arrested on charges of financial fraud. That was the last straw. His face was shown on the TV screen, tired, with dull eyes. The man who destroyed Aaron's family is now in ruins himself. Chloe saw the news while sitting on the couch. She didn't say anything, but Aaron noticed her shoulders slump even more. Her world, based on illusions, had finally collapsed. That evening, Chloe approached Aaron. She was standing at the door of his room, nervously tugging at the hem of his t-shirt. Aaron, she said softly, I want to apologize to you. He didn't interrupt her. I know I've ruined everything. I know that I no longer deserve your trust, but please give me a chance to at least explain myself. Aaron stood up, moving closer to her. He stared at her for a long time. There was so much guilt and pain in her eyes that he felt the remnants of his rage evaporate. Chloe, he said at last, forgiveness is not something that returns everything as it was. This is what allows us to go further. She nodded, not trying to object. Aaron realized that he no longer wanted to hold a grudge. He let her go at that moment, not for her sake, but for his own. That night, he sat at the kitchen table for a long time, looking out the window. The city was asleep, covered with a soft blanket of snow. His thoughts were about the future, about a life he could rebuild. Irene, her image appeared more and more often in his head. She was the opposite of Chloe, sincere, kind, strong. Aaron knew that he had a chance of happiness with her. Justice has been done. But along with this came the realization, the main thing is not revenge. The main thing is to find the strength to live on. And Aaron felt that he was ready. Another week has passed. Winter continued to hold the city in its cold embrace. Aaron felt his own life gradually thawing out. Every new day was filled with activities, meetings, and thoughts about the future. And although the past still reminded of itself from time to time, it no longer caused burning pain. After Chloe left, there was a strange silence in their apartment. She packed her things the day after their conversation, explaining that she needed time to sort herself out. Aaron didn't object. He saw her off with the feeling that it was the right move for both of them. With Chloe gone, he felt as if the weight that had been weighing on him for the past few months had suddenly disappeared. Now the apartment belonged only to him. His thoughts, his habits, his life. Her smartphone and cosmetics weren't on the table, her bags weren't in the hallway, and this absence no longer seemed empty, but rather liberating. Aaron spent more and more time with Irene. She invited him to help with the final preparations of her studio for the opening. It was a small but cozy corner where everything was done with a soul. The soft colors of the walls, the antique mannequins she bought at the flea market, and the wooden shelves they had painted together last Saturday. I can't believe everything is ready, said Irene, standing in the middle of the workshop. Her face was glowing with happiness, and Aaron could feel her joy spreading to him. You're doing great, he replied, admiring her burning eyes. It's all thanks to you, she smiled. If it weren't for you, I would still be postponing the opening. Aaron wanted to object, but her words suddenly seemed important to him. For the first time in a long time, he felt that his support really meant something, that he was needed. In the evening, they decided to celebrate the opening of the studio by having a small dinner at Irene's house. She made an apple pie, and Aaron brought a bottle of good Cabernet. They were sitting in the kitchen, talking about life, and Aaron found himself thinking that he hadn't felt so calm in a long time. You've been through a lot, Irene said, pouring him some more wine, and you're still so stoic. Persistent? What is it? He asked, grinning. Sometimes I feel like I'm just being stubborn. That too, she remarked. That too, she remarked. That too. Irene looked at him with a warmth that made Aaron forget all his worries. Her words, her smile, her gestures were simple, but there was something more to them. They spent the evening talking, laughing, and having light memories. Aaron felt that this evening had become something special for him, the beginning of a new chapter where there was no more place for pain and betrayal. At home, sitting at the kitchen table, Aaron suddenly realized how far he had come from what he was just a few months ago. Back then, he thought his life was ruined, that Chloe's betrayal had robbed him of everything. But now he understood that this betrayal, no matter how painful it was the starting point for his changes. He took out an old notebook in which he had once written down plans for revenge. As he flipped through the pages, he felt the weight of the past go away with each line. He closed the notebook and, without hesitation, threw it into the trash can. With this gesture, he finally said goodbye to what had been weighing on him for so long. The following days were busy. Aaron returned to work with renewed vigor, and his colleagues noticed the changes. Sam no longer joked about his sullen appearance, but often asked about what was obviously going on outside the factory. Aaron and Irene continued to spend time together, and their bond grew stronger every day. One day, walking through a snowy park, Irene suddenly stopped and, looking into his eyes, said, "You know, Aaron, sometimes it seems to me that we did not meet by chance." "I think so too," he replied without looking away. It was a simple moment, but it had everything: their trust in each other, their shared pain, and hope for the future. A few weeks later, Irene invited Aaron to the studio opening. She gathered close friends, several neighbors, and even an old acquaintance who had long offered to start her own business. Aaron stood aside, watching Irene proudly show off her creation to the guests. Her joy was contagious, and he felt again that this place had become something important to him. When the guests had left, Irene came up to him. "Thank you for being there," she said softly, taking his hand. Aaron looked at her and realized that it was more than gratitude. It was a recognition that their bond had become something real. That night, Aaron returned home with a smile. He felt that he had finally found not only peace, but also a new purpose. He no longer had to cling to the pain of the past. Now he had a new path in front of him, the path he wanted to walk next to Irene. Sitting in the kitchen, he opened the window and breathed in the frosty air. The city was asleep, shrouded in the soft glow of streetlights. Aaron knew that there would be more difficulties ahead, but now he was ready for them. He felt that he had really started a new life, and in this life, there was a place not only for justice, but also for happiness. Winter was gradually giving way to early spring. The ice on the roads began to melt, water dripped from the roofs of houses, and the sun increasingly broke through the gray clouds. Aaron was living a new life. His days were filled with work, meetings with Irene, and the quiet satisfaction that, despite everything, he was able to rebuild himself. However, sometimes he thought about Chloe, not out of longing or regret, but more out of curiosity. What was she doing? How was she coping with what she had destroyed? About a week later, he bumped into her at a local grocery store. She was standing at the grocery shelf, casually dressed, with a sullen face that reflected sleepless nights. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, and there were traces of recent tears on her cheeks. Chloe noticed him and froze, like a schoolgirl caught in the act. "Hi," she managed, smiling nervously. "Hi," Aaron replied. The silence seemed endless. Finally, Chloe broke it first. "You look great." "Thank you," he replied shortly. She looked away, as if hesitating to ask something that had been on her tongue for a long time. Are you seeing someone?" Aaron wondered for a moment if he should answer her, but decided not to hide it. "Yes." Her face tensed, but she quickly hid her emotions behind a tight smile. "That's good. You deserve to be happy." "Thank you, Chloe," he replied, trying not to sound cold. She suddenly sighed, looked down, and said, "Aaron, I really want to say that I'm sorry for everything I've done to you, to us." He was silent, letting her speak. "I thought I deserved a better life. I thought Andrew was my chance. But it turned out to be a lie. He used me, and when everything went wrong, he just dumped me. Aaron stared at her intently, feeling neither anger nor satisfaction, just a quiet, slightly bitter pity. "You've made your choice, Chloe," he finally said. "Every choice has consequences." She nodded, fighting back tears. "I know. And now I'm alone." After that meeting, Chloe disappeared from his life completely. Aaron wasn't looking for contact with her anymore, and she didn't seem to be trying to reconnect. However, rumors about her life reached him through acquaintances. Her days began to resemble wandering in the fog. She changed several jobs, but she never stayed anywhere for long. Spencer, whom she had once considered her salvation, had not only abandoned her, but had also become a reminder of how wrong she had been. Chloe was no longer the confident and bright woman she once thought she was. Now her life consisted of loneliness and quiet remorse. Aaron, on the other hand, was moving forward. His relationship with Irene grew stronger every day. They found in each other what they were looking for: warmth, understanding, support. One evening, sitting in her cozy studio, Aaron looked at her and said, "Do you know what changed my life, Irene?" She smiled in surprise. "What do you mean?" "If it weren't for you, I'd be stuck in the past, in resentment, in anger, and you showed me that life can be different." She looked at him tenderly. Her eyes were shining with happiness. "And you've shown me that I can trust you again." Together they began to plan for the future. For the first time in a long time, Aaron wasn't thinking about the past, but about what lay ahead. They dreamed of going to the coast together, expanding Irene's studio, and even discussed the possibility of starting a small family business. Aaron felt that his life had finally found meaning. He let go of his grievances, forgave Chloe, and accepted the lessons fate had taught him. It's been a few months. Aaron accidentally saw Chloe again, but this time from afar. She was sitting on a bench in the park alone, with a book in her hands. Her face looked calm, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. He didn't come over. He had nothing more to say to her. She made her choice, just like him. Now their paths have finally parted. It was a new chapter in his life, a life where there was no more betrayal, pain, or loneliness. Now he had Irene. He had love. He had hope. And with every step he took, he became more and more convinced that the best in his life was yet to come.